Hello, Bible nerds, and welcome to the very first episode of Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye. Let's journey through the Bible in a fun and fresh way. I'm your host, and today we're kicking off with Genesis chapters 1 through 5, literally the beginning of everything. We will cover the creation of the world, the adventures and misadventures of humans, and the world's first family drama, because, why not? If anything, that is probably the best part of Genesis. It's just my opinion. So buckle up because we've got a lot to explore in this episode, from the universe being created in 7 days to a talking snake stirring up trouble, and even the first sibling rivalry turning deadly. So don't worry, we'll keep it humorous and engaging. So whether you are well versed in these stories or hearing them for the first time, I've got you covered with a narrative style that's easy to follow and some fun facts and insights, along the way. So grab a seat, cozy seat, and let's get right on it. Genesis 1, Creation Week. Picture this: absolute nothingness, complete darkness, chaos. And then out of the void, God speaks into the darkness. "Let there be light," he says, and boom, light appears. Suddenly there's day and night, evening and morning. And that's day one of creation. But God is just getting started. On day two, God creates a huge expanse to separate waters above and below. Basically, he installs the sky like a cosmic dome. Now we have atmosphere. Fast forward to day three, God gathers the lower waters so that dry land appears. On that land, plants and trees start sprouting everywhere. Imagine lush green vegetation popping up as if someone hit fast forward on growth. And then God steps back and thinks, "This is good." Now day four arrives. Time to set the mood lighting for our universe. God places the sun in the sky for daytime and moon to light up the night, and sprinkles in a billion stars for good measure, Not a bad decorative touch. Also handy for calendars and seasons. And when you're just camping at night, Um, on day five, things get noisy. God fills the seas with fish and giant creatures, sea creatures, and the sky with all kinds of birds. Suddenly, the once quiet world has the sounds of splashing and flapping. God tells these creatures, "Be fruitful and multiply." Basically, go have lots of babies and baby fish and baby birds. they do. Then comes day six, the grand finale of creation. God brings land animals of every kind, from elephants to tiny ants, roaring lions, goofy elephants, to dogs and cats with attitude, just like my daughter. So an entire zoo appears on the earth, but he's not done. In a divine inner conversation, God says, "Let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness." Side note, who is us? A heavenly discussion, but we'll save that fun theological puzzle for another time. So God creates human beings in his own image. Male and female, he created them. This is like the moment the first people come to be. God blesses them and gives them a mission. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and rule over it. In other words, have kids, spread out, and take good care of this planet and all its creatures. Humanity is meant to be God's image bearer and partner in managing creation. At the end of day six, God looks at everything he made, the light, sky, land, plants, stars, animals, and humans, and gives it a big thumbs up. It's all very good. Now, with creation completed, day seven comes, though it's actually described at the start of the next chapter. On the seventh day, God rests. He isn't tired. He's God after all. But he deliberately stops working to set apart this day as holy. It's like God establishes the universe's first day off, the origin of the Sabbath. Imagine the Creator kicking back, just figuratively speaking, to enjoy how good everything turned out. And that's the creation week in a nutshell. A burst of divine creativity in 6 days and celebratory rest on the seventh. Pretty epic first week. I think so. I think it is. Well, it is definitely epic because, it's God. Okay, let's talk about some fun facts or just facts. I think these facts are interesting. I picked them myself, so I definitely find them interesting. But as far as fun, I don't know. That's up to you to decide. First one. So the structured 7-day creation pattern isn't just a week. It's symbolic. It's not 7 days. That it could have been one day. Could have been a year worth or a century or who knows, but it's symbolic. But by using 7 days, the biblical text emphasizes a sense of completeness and perfection in God's creative work, culminating with a holy day of rest. This is why the number 7 often represents wholeness in the Bible. So that's my first kind of fact. Second one is the word Genesis comes from Greek and literally means origin or beginning. So, very appropriate for a book that describes the origin of the universe, life, and humanity. In fact, Genesis introduces the beginning of almost everything, from the universe and life and to concepts like family and rest and all of that. Okay, so my third fact. According to the text, humans are made in the image of God. So this idea is unique. It gives humans a special value and role. It's not about physical appearance, but our capacity for reason, creativity, moral understanding, relationships, etc. So in other words, among all creatures, humanity alone is described as reflecting God's personal attributes in some way. And that is chapter 1. Now on to chapter 2, the Garden of Eden. So here's the story. Chapter 2 zooms in for a closer look at the creation of the first humans at their home. We get a second perspective on creation, a more intimate, down-to-earth story. Imagine a fresh world with no shrubs or crops yet, because no rain had fallen and there was no one to farm the land. Instead, a mist, or stream, rises from the earth to water the ground. In this watered dust, God now acts like a hands-on sculptor. He forms a man, he forms a man's shape from the dust of the ground and then breathes into his nostrils the breath of life. In a divine CPR moment, the man comes alive as a living being. The first man is later named Adam, which simply means human or man. Let me just throw in a fun fact here. Adam is related to the Hebrew word for ground, Adamah, highlighting that he's literally, earthling made from earth. So God then plants a magnificent garden in a place called Eden, which means delight or pleasure. Think of Eden as the most beautiful park you can imagine. Gorgeous trees of every kind with tasty fruit to eat, and in the middle, 2 special trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God places Adam in this paradise garden to till and keep it, to take care of it. Basically, to be the gardener and caretaker of this perfect piece of creation. And God gives a clear instruction, the very first divine command to a human. He says, you can freely eat from any tree here except that one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat from that tree, you will die. That's the one rule in Eden. Consider it a cosmic version of don't push the big red button. Everything else is yours to enjoy. Just trust God on this one boundary. So Adam has a beautiful home, a meaningful work, but God notices one thing that's not good. It is not good for the man to be alone. Surprising, right? Up until now, everything was good or very good. This is the first not good in the Bible. Loneliness. God says, I will make him a helper as his partner. Now, helper here isn't an insult or implying inferiority. It's like a complementary partner. Even God is called a helper elsewhere in the Bible. To show Adam his needs, God has him do an interesting task. He brings all the animals and birds to Adam and to name them. So Adam becomes the first zoologist giving names, zebra, eagle, hippopotamus, platypus. Like, imagine the creativity. He probably had a blast doing that. It's fun. But as the animals parade by, Adam realizes none of these creatures is truly a partner for him. Cute? Yes. Helpful for cuddles? Sure. But a true equal companion? Nope. So God steps in to solve the loneliness problem. He causes Adam to fall into a deep sleep, first anesthesia. Then God performs a bit of divine surgery. He takes one of Adam's ribs and from it forms a new human, a woman. When Adam wakes up, God essentially introduces him to his new partner. Adam's reaction is basically the first love poem. This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. In modern terms, Adam is saying, wow, this one is like me, finally. He names her woman in Hebrew, Isha. That's what it says. Woman in Hebrew is Isha because she was taken out of Ish, man. There's a poetic wordplay happening there. So the narrator adds that this is why in the human story a man leaves his parents and joins his wife and they become one flesh, the foundation of marriage. At this point, Adam and his new wife, soon to be named Eve, are living the dream. They're in paradise. They are naked as jaybirds but feel no shame about it, and they have a close friendship with God. Intimate, relationship with God. It's innocence, love, and harmony all around. Truly the garden of delight. And that's it for Genesis 2. I'll enjoy this comic before the storm because things are about to take turn into the next chapter. Okay, now on to our fun, not so fun, whatever, interesting facts. So Eden, as I've mentioned earlier, it means, pleasure or delight. So it's not just a random name. It literally means, again, pleasure or delight in Hebrew. The Garden of Eden is Garden of Delight, really. So sounds kind of dreamy. It implies that the garden was a place of joy and abundance. No wonder we use Eden as a synonym for paradise. Okay, my next one is, so in Genesis 1, the creator is referred to simply as God or Elohim. So in Genesis 2, a different title appears, Lord God, which is Yahweh Elohim in Hebrew. Combining God's personal name with God, this reflects a more personal, covenantal aspect of God. The shift in divine name and the differing sequence of creation events. Humans created after animals in chapter 1, but the man appears before animals in chapter 2. These are some reasons scholars say we have two distinct creation accounts woven together. They're not contradictory. Think of them as two camera angles on the same event. One wide angle, like, chapter 1, cosmic scale, and the close up, chapter 2, human scale. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. And my last fact, the first thing God ever declares not good is loneliness. It is not good that the man should be alone. In Genesis 2, verse 18, a stark contrast to all the and God saw that it was good of chapter 1. This highlights that humans are made for relationships, whether it's friendship or relationship with your family or relation, like there's different kinds of relationships, but relationships in general. Like, we're social creatures by design. Interestingly, woman is created as the remedy for man's aloneness, underscoring the equal value and necessity of both genders in God's plan. In fact, some commentators point out Adam wasn't truly complete until Eve was there. She's described as a helper suitable for him, meaning a partner who corresponds to him. So here's just, I guess, kind of my take on this whole thing. Like, Genesis 2 gives us a ground level view of creation, emphasizing the personal touch of God and the ideal relationship at the dawn of humanity. We see God's intimacy with humans. He forms Adam from clay like a potter and breathes life into him. This suggests care and closeness. We also learn that humans are created with a need for community. The declaration, not good for man to be alone, speaks to the importance of companionship, ultimately reflected in the union of man and woman in marriage. The creation of Eve from Adam's side beautifully conveys equality and partnership. And Genesis 2 sets up an ideal humanity in right relationship with God and with each other. It's a portrait of harmony. Humans and nature in sync. Humans and God in fellowship, and humans with each other in unity. This blissful scenario is the backdrop that makes the next chapter fall so tragic. But it also reinforces the value God places on love, trust, and togetherness. As readers, we are invited to yearn for and ultimately seek a return to that Eden-like state of right relationships. All right, on to Genesis 3, the fall, the paradise lost. So here's the story. Everything in Eden was awesome until it wasn't. Enter the serpent, a snake who, as the text says, was more crafty than any other wild animals. The cunning creature comes slithering up to the woman. Or we don't know if the snake was slithering at that point. But to the woman, Adam's wife, and strikes up a conversation. Like, yes, a talking snake. The Bible doesn't even preface it with weirdly the snake talk. It just goes for it or anything like that. It was as if that was very normal, which I guess that was normal. So the serpent says, "Psst, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Clearly the snake is exaggerating to, sow doubt. And the woman corrects him. "We may eat fruit from the trees, just not from the one in the middle. God said, don't eat or even touch that tree, or else we will die." The serpent grins, I imagine, and replies, "You won't surely die. In fact, God knows that if you eat it, your eyes will be open and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil." This is the ultimate temptation. He's suggesting God is holding out on them, and that disobeying will actually make them more enlightened. The woman glances at the forbidden tree's fruit. It looks delicious, I guess, and the idea of gaining wisdom is awfully appealing. In that moment, she decides to go for it, and she plucks the fruit. What kind of fruit? The Bible doesn't specifically say what kind of fruit. It never says apple, by the way. So, you know. And then she takes a bite, and then she gives some to Adam, who's right there with her, and she eats too. Or he eats too. So they're, dun dun, their eyes are open indeed, but not to be, it was not a glorious enlightenment. What they suddenly realize is, we're naked, so their innocence is gone. They experience shame for the first time, and in a panic, they scramble to cover themselves, stitching together fig leaves into makeshift aprons, or whatever. So fashion in Eden just went from carefree nudity to awkward DIY leaf outfits. So, how the mighty have fallen. So later they hear the sound of the Lord, God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. What a striking image. God strolling through Eden. Anyway, so Adam and his wife hide among the trees because now they're afraid to face God. Another first, which is fear. God calls out, Adam, where are you? And of course, God knows where they are, but like a concerned parent, he is inviting them to come forward and confess and just take accountability. Adam finally peeked out and says, I heard you, but I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. God replies, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat from? Now begins the classic blame game. Adam points at the woman and says, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit and I ate it. Like, did you catch that? Adam not only blames Eve, he subtly blames God for giving him Eve in the first place. Like, very bold move, Adam. God then asks the woman, what is this you have done? She passes the buck as well. The serpent tricked me and I ate it. In other words, the devil made me do it. At this point, God issues consequences, often called the curse. So first to the serpent, because of this you are cursed above all animals. You will crawl on your belly and eat dust all your life. So if the snake had legs, he has lost them now, henceforth, slithering in the dirt, which is why people often despise snakes. God also declares there will be hostility between the serpent and the woman, and between his offspring and hers. Importantly, he says, one day the woman's offspring will strike the serpent's head, while the serpent will strike his heel. This cryptic line hints that a descendant of Eve will someday battle evil and win. Many see this as the Bible's first prophecy, foreshadowing Jesus' victory over Satan. Next, God speaks to the woman. He says, I will greatly increase your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. So every mom out there can thank Eve for those labor pains. I felt all of it when I gave birth to my daughter. I had zero pain medicine, not even a Motrin, nothing. So thanks, Eve, yes, for that. Also, he says, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Now, this implies the harmonious partnership will, distort into a power struggle, the sad origin of a lot of gender conflict through history. Then God addresses Adam, because you listened to your wife and ate from the forbidden tree, the ground is cursed because of you. You'll eke out of living with painful toil all your life. Thorns and thistles will plague you, and by the sweat of your brow you'll get your bread to eat. In short, work, which was once pure joy, will now often be frustrating and hard. And then the final blow, mortality. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now death enters human experience. They won't live forever anymore in their fallen state. After delivering these heavy consequences, God does something merciful. He makes clothes for Adam and Eve from animal skins and dresses them. Like, these durable clothes are a lot better than the itchy fig leaves. So some see a symbolic act of God providing a covering, maybe even the first sacrifice, but at the very least, it shows God still cares for them. And Adam at this point names his wife Eve, which means living or life giver, because she would become the mother of all humans. Oh, despite what's happened, life will go on in a glimmer of hope. Finally, God says to the heavenly court, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. It's as if humans have taken autonomous moral judgment into their own hands, a role they weren't ready for. And God decides to prevent a worse scenario. So Adam and Eve, in their fallen state, must not eat from the tree of life and live forever. They can't live forever anymore. So God sends them out of the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which Adam was taken. Then he stations a cherubim and a flaming sword that flashes back and forth at the east side of the garden to guard the way to the tree of life. So, epic eviction, paradise lost, entrance closed. So Adam and Eve steps out into the wider world, carrying on them the knowledge of good and evil, the burden of sin and the promise of eventual death, but also carrying God's promise that evil won't have the last word. Yeah, so it's a somber tale, but integral to the rest of the biblical story, which is basically God's mission to set things right again. Okay, I have some fun facts. Should we do some fun facts? Okay, so nowhere does Genesis 3 say the forbidden fruit was an apple, as I've mentioned earlier. The text simply calls it fruit. So the popular apple idea likely came from later traditions. Some ancient Jewish commentators actually speculated fruit might have been a fig, since Adam and Eve cover themselves with fig leaves right after. I don't know, but nobody knows. The fruit's identity is not really the point of the story anyways, but it's not apple. Okay, that is my fun fact for this chapter. Okay, now on to chapter 4, Genesis 4. Cain and Abel, brother's keeper. So, life outside of Eden begins. Adam and Eve starts a family, and chapter 4 zooms in on their first two kids, setting up the first family saga in history. Eve gives birth to a son, her firstborn, and names him Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Cain's name sounds like the Hebrew word for gotten or acquired, since, she got a son. Later, Eve has another son, Abel. Abel's name intriguingly means breath or vapor. Maybe a hint of how fleeting his life will be. Now, the boys grow up and each has his own occupation. Cain becomes a farmer, working the soil, and Abel becomes a shepherd, tending flocks. At some point, the brothers bring offering to God from their labor. Cain brings some of his harvested crops, and Abel brings the firstborn of his sheep flock, the fattest portions. God looks favorably on Abel's offering, but not Cain's. Now, we're not told explicitly why. Like, there's a lot of speculation. Maybe Abel brought the best he had with a sincere heart, while Cain's attitude or offering wasn't as sincere or was just second rate. Who knows? Regardless, Cain is furious. He, his face is downcast, jealousy and anger boiling inside. Now, God, like a wise counselor, speaks to Cain. Why are you angry? If you do well, won't you be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. You must master jealousy. Jealousy is just such a very, very ugly emotion. Anyway, so God basically warns Cain, be careful. You're at a crossroad. You're tempted to do wrong, but you can still choose the right. Don't let sin pounce on you. Unfortunately, Cain doesn't heed the warning. Instead, he invites Abel to go out with him to the field. While they're out in the field, Cain attacks his brother Abel and kills him. It's a shocking turn. Like the first murder. And it's brother against brother. So soon after, paradise, human relationships have devolved into violence. Later, the Lord asks Cain, where is your brother Abel? Giving Cain a chance to own up. Cain responds with the, now famous retort, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? In other words, how should I know? It's not my job to keep track of my brother. This phrase, am I my brother's keeper, has echoed through literature and culture as the ultimate expression of dodging responsibility for the welfare of God. Of course, God knows exactly what happened. He says, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Abel's spilled blood figuratively calls for justice. God then pronounces Cain's punishment. The ground which received Abel's blood is cursed for Cain. No longer will it yield good crops for him. Farming will be futile. Cain is condemned to be a restless wanderer on the earth. Now, Cain is distraught at this sentence. He says, my punishment is more than I can bear. You're driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I'll be a fugitive and a wanderer, and anyone who finds me will kill me. Now, Cain is fearful that, relatives or other future people will seek revenge for Abel. In an act of mercy, God responds, not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on them sevenfold. And the Lord puts a mark on Cain to protect him, some kind of sign or distinguishing feature so that no one who encounters him would kill him. We don't know what that mark looked like, but it serves as a divine hands off the sky signal. This is significant. Even after such a grievous sin, God provides grace and protection to Cain, preventing an endless cycle of blood revenge. So Cain leaves and settles in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So a fun fact, Nod literally means wandering in Hebrew, an apt name for Cain's new turf as a wanderer. But Cain doesn't wander forever. He actually builds a city there. So much for wandering. But he names the city after his son Enoch. Now, this is not the Enoch that is, more famous. The famous Enoch. This is a different Enoch. Anyways, we'll talk about the legendary Enoch later on. So this story then gives a rapid genealogy on Cain's descendants. Now, we won't cover all the names, but a few stands out. One descendant, Lamech, is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. Probably not a good reason. He introduces polygamy, having more than one wife. He had two wives named Ada and Zillah. Now, Lamech also boasts to his wife in a little poem that he killed a man for wounding him. And if Cain is avenged sevenfold, now Lamech will be avenged 77-fold. It's, it's a sign that violence is ramping up through the generations. Things are getting worse, not better. Meanwhile, back with Adam and Eve, they have another son named Seth to fill the void left by Abel. Eve says, God has appointed for me another child instead of Abel since Cain killed him. In fact, Seth means appointed or granted. So Seth grows up and has a son named Enosh. Now, the chapter notes that around this time, people began to call on the name of the Lord, which likely means people started worshiping God more formally or publicly again. It's like a little positive note to end on, despite the darkness of murder and exile. A new line, Seth's line, is started, and people are reaching out to God. Genesis 4 shows humanity's downward spiral after Eden. Jealousy, murder, denial, societal decay, but it also shows God's continued involvement and mercy, as well as the birth of a new hope through Seth. I'll skip the fun fact this time. All right. Last one. Genesis 5. From Adam to Noah. Ancient family tree. Now, if you've ever skimmed through a phone book, if you even know what a phone book is, kids these days, or a genealogy list, you have an idea of Genesis 5. This chapter is essentially Adam's family tree. It traces the line of Adam down to Noah, and it's notable for the extreme longevity of the people and a very repetitive format. We go something like so and so lived X years, fathered so and so, then lived Y more years and had other sons and daughters, and he died. And then his son does the same and he died, and so on. It might seem a little dry, but there are a few gems worth highlighting in this list of early patriarchs. First off, Adam and Eve, their line being traced here is through their son Seth, not Cain. Okay, this is the line from Seth. So the text reminds us that God made humans in his likeness, and Adam passed that image on through his offspring. Adam's entry, he lived 130 years before fathering Seth. Talk about waiting to start a family. Then lived another 800 years, having more sons and daughters. They never mention daughters throughout the Bible, really. There's only I can count with my one hand, I think, the daughters. Anyways, and then he died at 930 years old. Yep, 930 years old. It's almost a millennium. A millennium is 1,000, right? Yeah. So it's almost a millennium. Either those were some strong genes back then, or the text is using a different way of measuring time. It's a topic of debate. Not that I will take, but anyways, these folks lived a long time. Period. The pattern continues. Seth becomes a father at 105, lives to 912. Enosh, fathers at 90, lives to 905. Kenan, fathers at 70, lives to 910. Mahalalel, fathers at 65, lives at 895. Jared, fathers at 162, lives to 962. Are you noticing the trend? They're all clocking out in their 800s or 900s, except a couple exceptions. So the long lifespan have prompted many questions and theories, from symbolic meanings of numbers to environmental factors before the flood. But the text itself doesn't explain. It just lists them, matter of factly. Now we get to one exception figure, Enoch, who is Jared's son. Now this is the Enoch that I was talking about, the man, the myth, the legend, the Enoch. So Enoch is notable because he breaks the mold. He becomes a father at 65 to Methuselah. And then it says Enoch walked with God for 300 years and had other kids. And at 365 years old, it pointedly says Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more because God took him. Like, what? Like, unlike everyone else in the list, it does not say and he died for Enoch. It implies that Enoch didn't experience death in the normal way. So God took him directly. And so Enoch is the one of two individuals in the Bible who are said to have bypassed death. The other one is Elijah, much later. Just spoiler. Enoch's close relationship with God, it says walk with God, is emphasized, making him a bright spot of faith in an otherwise increasingly corrupt world. Okay, moving on. Enoch's son Methuselah wins the prize for longevity. He lives the longest of anyone in the Bible, a whopping 969 years. So, whenever someone lives a long life today, you'll often hear the hyperbole as old as Methuselah. So that's where that came from, I guess, if you've ever heard that. Interestingly, if you do the math, Methuselah's death coincides with the year of the Great Flood. Some traditions say his name even meant when he dies, it will be sent, hinting the flood would come after his death. Now, if that's true, then Methuselah's record age could be seen as a symbol of God's extreme patience. In any case, Methuselah becomes a father to Lamech at 187 and dies at 969. Finally, we meet Lamech, not to be confused with Cain's descendant, of the same name. This Lamech is from Seth's line. Now, this Lamech is important because he is Noah's dad. Lamech lives 182 years and then has a son whom he names Noah, saying, "Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and the painful toil of our hands." So the name Noah sounds like the Hebrew word for rest or comfort, reflecting Lamech's hope that Noah would bring some comfort or relief. Now, Lamech lives a total of 777 years. Now, fun fact, that's 777, which is kind of a number of completeness. Cain's Lamech had boasted of 7 sevenfold vengeance. Maybe it's a narrative wink. Then Lamech dies. So Genesis 5 might read like a list of ancient Hall of Fame ages, but it serves to connect the dots from Adam to Noah and to show that although death now reigns, God's plan is still moving forward one generation at a time. Ugh. My daughter just woke up and now sitting next to me. Okay, so I have to admit, reading these early Genesis stories always gets me reflecting on my own life in a surprising way. For example, I grew up as the oldest out of my cousins, because I'm an only child. So, of my cousins, actually both from mother and father side, I'm the eldest. So, I really, sympathize with the whole Cain and Abel dynamic. Thankfully, my quarrels with my cousins never, went beyond shouting matches over, what did we play back then? Nintendo. But I distinctly remember one time, we were at my grandma's house, me and my cousin. I was probably 10 and my cousin was probably 6 years old. This cousin is 6 years old, and we were racing and we were running in the hallway, and I don't know, for some reason we bumped into each other, and then he fell on the floor, you know so that was kind of like a thought flash in my head, because my aunt, my cousin's mom, he she got so mad and started screaming at me and all that stuff. Like, am I my my cousin's keeper? Yes, Baba. I know. I'm almost done. Like, am I my cousin's keeper? Like, it's not my fault that we bump into each other. Like, he's not my responsibility or something like that. I was trying to find a relatable experience. Anyway, so on a lighter note, the creation story bit about God resting on the seventh day speaks to me too. So last year I attempted one of those productivity challenges where you work out every day and learn a new skill in 6 days, and by the 7th day I was, absolutely exhausted. So that's another experience that I can relate with, I guess, in this episode. So we've journeyed from the dawn of creation to the first civilization, and it's already been quite a roller coaster. Perfect world, a devastating fall, generations flying by. By the end of Genesis 5, we've arrived at Noah, and the name, you might guess what's coming in episode 2. Things are about to get, wet. Mm-hmm. I'm almost done. Okay. Humanity by Noah's time becomes thoroughly corrupted. We're talking violence, chaos, and the whole world gone wrong. But one man, Noah, finds favor with God. God is going to press the reset button in a dramatic fashion, a worldwide flood, and Noah will build a certain famous ark. Yes, with all the animals to save a remnant of life. It's one of the most cinematic stories in the Bible, complete with doves and rainbows and, well, a lot of rain. Will Noah's family usher in a new beginning for humanity? Excuse me. Will things finally change for the better, or will new troubles arise from the floodwater after the floodwaters recede? So in our next episode, we'll dive into the flood story, covering Genesis 6 through 10. Expect drama of biblical proportions, the construction of the giant boat, the gathering of creatures, 2 by 2, 40 days of rainfall, and the aftermath as the world starts over. We'll we'll also discuss the beautiful rainbow at the end and what it means. It's a tale of judgment, but also of hope and promise. You won't want to miss it. So stay tuned for episode 2, Noah and the Great Flood, where we find out what happens when the earth gets a hard reset. Thank you so much for joining me in this inaugural episode of our podcast. It's been a blast sharing these foundational stories with you. It took longer than I thought it would be. It's, wow, almost an hour. I guess each episode is going to be about an hour, give or take. And then, adding a sprinkle of humor. I try to be humorous and then modern inside along the way. I hope Genesis 1 to 5 came alive in your imagination, whether it's picturing the first sunrise, emphasizing with the first couple as they fumble through blame and guilt, or shaking your head at humanity's first crime drama. There's a reason these stories have stuck around for millennia. They speak to our deepest experiences: creation, failure, family, and the longing for redemption. If you have enjoyed this episode, be sure to tune in next time as we continue the adventure. And the Bible is a huge narrative, and we have plenty more episodes to go. Like probably thousands of episodes if I'm gonna do like 5 chapters, if I'm gonna cover 5 chapters at a time. And don't worry, I'll be here to guide you through it all with a smile and probably a dad joke or two. I try to be funny. I think I'm funny, but you'll be the judge of that. Until next time, take care and maybe take a moment to appreciate the good in your world. Hug your siblings, and get some rest on the 7th day of your week. Thanks for listening, and see you in episode 2.